Hello, my name is John Philip Weisenhorn. I was born on August 11th, 1933, a Friday, I believe, and this is 90 over 90. I was born in a town, Quincy, Illinois, right on the Mississippi River, right at the end of the Depression. I was the last of my father's children. My mother had 4 children: my brother Charles, my brother Don, my sister Jane, who Charlie was 9 years older than I. Don was, he was 7 years older. Jane was 3 years older, and then me. And it was a very German community. In fact, when I brought my wife down to meet Dad, as we were dating, she looked through the phone book and she says, "My gosh, this looks like the Munich phone directory." The town was about 35,000, and we were a farm community for probably Quincy was the largest town for a 100-mile radius. And so we were the big city. It was a very Catholic town. There were 8 churches in Quincy, Catholic churches. And of course, we were mixed. We had the Lutherans and Methodists, Episcopalians. In fact, the Seventh-day Adventists were across the street and down at the corner from our house. I grew up really pretty straightforwardly. I went to a Catholic school. We were taught by the School Sisters of Notre Dame. It was St. Francis community, St. Francis Church. It was a very large church. We had, we had a 5 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, a 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, a 10, and an 11:15 Mass every Sunday morning. And it was a large church, and it was fairly well filled, and that was pretty typical. The school we had was an 8th grade school. It was right across the street from the church, and across the street in another direction from the church was what is now Quincy University, but we called it St. Francis College at that time. Again, it was all Franciscan priests, and they were all over the place. Many of the priests taught at the college, and so we were kind of enshrined and nurtured very much in the Franciscan philosophy. The School Sisters of Notre Dame were our teachers, and the grade school had 8 grades, and there were 2 of every grade. And in each classroom we had, anywhere from 40 to 50 students. It was a good experience for me. I enjoyed my high school years. I was not a particularly brainy child, and I was not very athletic, so when we chose to have baseball teams, there was another fellow that had a hair lip that was a friend of mine. We had the same birth date. I was chose second last, and he was chose last. Interesting things we remember. When I was growing up, we had an interesting neighborhood. I had friends that lived maybe a block away, and the folks that were closest to us were primarily older adults. It was a very friendly neighborhood. We all had garages, and the doors of the garages were rarely closed. Everything was available, and each of us had different sets of tools. And so if somebody wanted a digging fork, my father had a digging fork, but we did not have a spade. But the Christs, 2 doors down, had spades, and so we'd just go over if we needed a spade and get the spade. My father had a rule. He said, anytime you borrow a tool from somebody, you make sure you clean it and bring it back to them in better condition than you borrowed it. And so if it was any kind of a cutting tool, we always had to sharpen it before we took it back. We were close to the country. It was, maybe 1.25 miles from my house in just about any direction, and you would be in farmland. We had friends that had farms, and we oftentimes would go out. I never did milk a cow, but my school chums, many of them, were farm children that came into school each day. Their parents would drive them in and drop them off at school, and then pick them up in the evening. These were the years just before the war, and they were fairly lean years, but pretty much the same for everybody. My father was in the printing business. He started out as a salesman for Jostin Kiefer Printing Company, and it was a relatively small operation, but I guess it was big in those days. They had linotype printing, and it was the only printer in the area for miles around that did 4-color printing. And so he would go around to the different communities and promote the ability to print 4-color brochures. And that was one of the things that they were very well noted for, is the good printing. At any rate, some of the things that I remember doing is my eldest brother, Charlie, one year for my birthday, gave me a bicycle. It was a used bicycle. I don't know where he got it, but I remember he paid $20 for it, which was a lot of money in those days. That was a big gift. And it was a Schwinn, and he cleaned it all up and painted it and had a nice big comfortable seat on it. And I rode that bike for years. And it was good transportation, and I could be in the country in 15 or 20 minutes riding my bike, and I'd go out and just lean it up against a fence and walk out into the field and go to the creeks and turn over rocks and look for crawdads, catch the crawdad and then turn him loose again. It was a simple life, but it was fun. We lived in a 2-story house, and it had a fairly good sized lot. The backyard ended up with a fence, a wooden fence, and we could play baseball in the backyard. It was big enough for that. And in my house, we had 3 bedrooms. My mother was ill in the later part of her life in the early days of my life. She died when I was 8 years old. And I remember just very little of my mother, but I do remember when she died. I remember a few times that I had interactions with her. I remember one time sitting on her lap, and that's a very pleasant experience for me, and I recall it often. My elder sister, Jane, was 3 years older than I, and after Mom died, Jane and I, in the summertime, would be in charge of the house. In the wintertime, when we were going to school, Dad had a very difficult time right after Mom died, trying to get things put together. He hired women to come in and just to cook and clean and be housekeepers for us. And we went through several of them. And then we found this lady, her name was Nellie Heyer, and she lived in Paloma, which was a small community, probably 20 minutes away from the house. And she was with us for many years, from the time, I guess I was maybe 9 years old by then when she came, and she stayed until my dad broke up housekeeping after I had left and grown up. And she was a lovely woman, a very simple woman, and very gentle. At any rate, for entertainment, we played cards. My dad taught me how to play cribbage and how to play pinochle. And we would play. The neighbors would sometimes come over and play cards with Dad, and I would sit in once in a while. We would listen to the radio in the evening. After we children did our homework, Dad would sit in his chair by the radio. He was a pipe smoker. He smoked corncob pipes, and he chewed on the bits of the pipes and just chewed them up. And so that's why he bought corncob pipes, and he would buy 20 at a time. The display cards, he would buy them from a wholesaler. And he chain smoked pipes. It was interesting. He didn't smoke at all during the day. But in the evening after dinner, he had about 6 or 7 pipes lined up, and he would fill them with this very dry tobacco and stack them up. And after you smoke a pipe, it gets hot, and you don't want to fill it and smoke it again because it's hot. So he'd put it in the back and take a fresh pipe. My graduation gift from my father was a railroad journey. I had earlier applied and got a job at Yellowstone National Park. I got that job in January. You have to apply way in advance. So at any rate, my uncle had suggested it. He had worked there back in the 20s. He drove a wagon. Back in the teens. And at any rate, I got a job and I worked in Yellowstone Park from the 1st of June to the end of September. And that was a fantastic experience. It was a simple little job. I was called a yardman scrubber. And I worked with 2 girls, and we would clean up the cabins. The girls would go in and actually clean the cabins. They had no restrooms in the cabins. They had a chamber pot, and the girls would set the chamber pot out on the front steps, and it would be my job to take it and empty it, clean it, sanitize it. They had little wood stoves, and I had a big bin on wheels that I loaded with wood, and I had a can of sawdust soaked in kerosene that we called starter, and they used a big long-handled spoon. And they'd throw the wood into the stove, put some of that starter on, and throw a match in, and off it'd go. We lived in those cabins. They called them tent tops. There was a wooden frame around the building, and then the top part was actually canvas over a wooden frame. And it was just one board thick in the walls. It had cracks in it. You could see light through. And when it got really cold, one time I remember I woke up in the morning and there was a light dusting of snow that had blown in through the cracks in the wall on top of my blanket. You get up and start a fire in the stove and jump back into the bed. And when the stove was glowing red, then you could get up and start moving around. After I got back from Yellowstone Park, Dad suggested that I might want to further my education, and I went to a trade school in Chicago. At the time I started going there, it was DeForest Training. It eventually became DeVry Tech, and I understand now it's called DeVry University. But in the days I went there, I studied the repair and use of radio and television equipment. And in those days we were vacuum tubes. And I eventually got through the studies in the course. I was there for 15 months. And when I graduated, I had a first-class FCC license to run a transmitter, and so I went back to Quincy. I went to school in Chicago, this DeVry Tech. Anyway, I went to Quincy and got a job at our radio station as a transmitter engineer, and it was out remote, and I was actually working at the transmitter where they had the big towers, and it was a pretty simple job. I would just sit there and check the equipment hourly and make notes. You had to keep a record of everything. I would check the temperature and relay that. At any rate, it was kind of a nice, simple life. And I had a part-time job on Sundays. I was the radio man for KHMO in Hannibal, Missouri, which was about a 30-minute drive from Quincy. I would get up and go to the 5 o'clock mass and then go down and turn the transmitter on and get KHMO on the air. And we worked with the Mutual Network, and I would connect to the network, and sometimes I would give local news, and I had a couple of disc jockey shows, and I was the only one there for all day Sunday. It was an interesting job. And then eventually I was drafted in 1953. I was drafted into the Army Signal Corps. And that was right at the end of the Korean War. And so I served 2 years, but it was all peacetime. I went to my basic training in Camp Gordon, Georgia, now Fort Gordon, and then went to school in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and then I was stationed in Huntsville, Alabama for the rest of my tour. And when I got out of that, I came back to Quincy and was working at a station down there, and I decided to go back to school. I had the GI Bill, and so I moved to Chicago and was going to DePaul University. In December, I took a bus back to Waukegan, Illinois, and proposed to Rosemary. He asked her father for her hand, and he had his fingers crossed behind his back, and he said yes. And so I proposed to Rosemary, and she accepted, and we got married the following April 22nd. That was 1961. And I took her away from her family. They were not pleased with that, but we lived in Memphis for about 6 months in a rental home, in a rental duplex. And then the company moved me to Jackson, Mississippi, so we moved into a home in Jackson, Mississippi. We had a real house, but it was rental. But it was very nice. It 3-bedroom, 2 baths, and one of those was my office. And I worked for the company called Rapistan. We sold conveyor equipment, and I covered that central Mississippi and southern Mississippi area. And after about 7 months there, I got an offer to move to Charlotte. They needed a salesman there, and there wasn't just a whole lot of activity where I was. I was making a living, but just barely. And Charlie encouraged me to take the offer, and so Rosemary and I were moved by the company to Charlotte, North Carolina. We lived there and started our family. In fact, when we moved, Rosemary was pregnant with our first child, Eric, and he was born in Charlotte. And along with the Rita and Nathan and Philip and Diane and Nancy and Rachel and Laura, and Leo was born there. And then we were transferred to Fort Worth, Texas, with the company Rapistan, and that was an exciting time for us to move. Rosemary was always so good. The children, some of them really didn't want to leave. They had friends there, but we talked them into the excitement of a new place and new living conditions and everything exciting, and living in Texas. And so the children all went along with it, and some of them had a few regrets, but they quickly made friends, and we settled into living in Fort Worth, Texas, and it was fun. We were the only children in the neighborhood. It was a very a long block, and it dead-ended in the school backyard, and we were the only children on the street, and so we were mostly welcomed because the elderly folks were just delighted to see little people running up and down the street, and our children were basically well behaved. We raised rabbits in those days. In fact, we had rabbits in Charlotte, and we took them with us. And that was fun. The children were part of that. They enjoyed the rabbits, and we named the breeding rabbits, but we couldn't name the little rabbits because we were going to eat those. Well, we had the 9 children that were born in Charlotte, and then when we got to Fort Worth, our son David was born in Fort Worth, and then we were eventually moved to Houston, and our final child, our 11th child, Sarah, was born in Houston, and living in Houston for 2 years, and the company closed the office and let me go. And so I took a map of the United States and brought it home and told Rose that I had been fired. But I said, don't worry about it. We can get this all taken care of. They gave me some severance pay. They carried me on. They fired me the end of August. I'm sorry, the end of October. And so I had November and December full pay and insurance. And so anyway, I laid a map of the United States out on the dining room table, and I said, where would you like to live? You tell me where you want to live, and I'll look for a job there. I don't care. I just want to be where you want to be. And she says, you don't need that map. I'm going to go back to Charlotte. And we enjoyed our life in Charlotte. It was a good neighborhood, and we had good friends. Both Rosemarie and I are mostly German. My mother was English and Irish, but Dad was very German, and the community I grew up in was German. Rosemarie was first generation American. Her parents came over. Both of her parents came from Germany and spoke German. In fact, when her older brother went to school, he was still speaking German. And Mom put him on the bus. And at any rate, the German heritage for me is Rosemarie and I think, were fairly well organized. We organized our family, and we had kind of you will do it. This is the way we live in this house. You have things that you are responsible for doing, and you will do them. And the children, they complained, and they had, they were children. But overall, they were really very good about doing the things that they were supposed to do. And every one of them had chores. If they could walk, as far as we were concerned, they could do something. And it was little things. But the children took care of vacuuming the house and doing the dusting. They did the dishes. We didn't have a dishwasher for quite a while when we were living there. And so they did the dishes afterwards. Rose taught them to cook, and once a week, two of the children were responsible to prepare a meal and serve it, and then the other children cleaned up. And they all pretty well learned to cook. There were a couple of them that resisted. But I made a chart. The Germans are good for putting things on paper. And so I made a chart and had each week of the month outlined and what each child was supposed to do. And it was all laid out on a piece of paper, and it was taped to the cabinet door. And one of them would come and say, Dad, I don't want to be doing this. And I said, what's on the paper? Well, I'm supposed to do it. Well, if you can negotiate with one of your siblings and trade off with them, that's fine with me. But the job has to be done. And you are responsible for it. So if you trade off with somebody, you make sure that they do it, because you must be responsible. And it worked. We could always say, no, I'm sorry, what does the paper say? I grew up Catholic. I went to a Catholic grade school. I went to a Catholic high school. I went to a Catholic college. And I have enjoyed my faith. My wife also went to a Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and a Catholic college. I was called to the diaconate, and I was ordained a deacon in 1995. I have a strong faith journey. It has not always been easy, any more for me than for anybody, but I always felt that God was with me. I know that it's going to be all right. There was a sister of Mercy that we became very acquainted with over the years, Sister Malden. And she was a sweet lady, and she says the whole of Scripture can be summed up in these 5 letters: it's going to be all right. And that's the way I feel about it. God is with me, and I truly feel I lead a charmed life. I have. I think most of my life I've had a positive attitude that I enjoy my life.
Okay. Winter or summer?
Summer.
Apples or oranges?
Apples.
Small family or large family?
Oh, large family.
North or south?
South.
City or country?
I think country.
Talking or listening?
That's hard. I'm a preacher. I guess talking.
Old Testament or New Testament?
New Testament.
Amen or amen?
Amen.
Rise early or stay up late?
Both.